Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to AJ102 Introduction to Criminal Justice. My name is Tony Farrar, and of course, I am your instructor for this semester. So, this week's lecture is going to cover Chapter 6, where we're going to take a look at the police, the organization, the role, and the function. So, we've got a lot of content to cover, so let's go ahead and just jump right into our weekly lecture. So some of the learning objectives, we're going to explain the organization of police departments, differentiate between patrol and investigations, discuss some of the various efforts to improve patrol, take a look at some of the key issues associated with the investigative function, explain the concept of community policing. List several challenges associated with community policing, discuss the concept of problem-oriented policing, look at intelligence-led policing, explain some of the various support functions in law enforcement, and identify some of the cost-saving measures that might be brought about, employed, etc., to improve police productivity. So let's go ahead and jump in. So although many police agencies today are in the process of rethinking their organization and goals, the majority are still organized in what we call a hierarchical manner. And within this organizational model, each element of the department normally has its own chain of command or its own rank system. So that's important for us to know. Now, when you look, your textbook talks about the New York PD rank structure. And you can see it starts at police officer, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, captain. It goes all the way up through police commissioner, who is the highest individual on there. And then kind of more closer to home, if you will. Hey, who's this guy right here? Oh, wait a minute, that's me. Anyway, when you talk more towards California, and again, it varies from state to state, it varies from the organizational size as well, but a standard structure would be police officer. Sometimes they would have a field training officer. That would be a rank. It could be corporal or detective, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, or commander. Sometimes these are the same, sometimes they're not. You might have a deputy or an assistant chief. And then finally, you would have the chief of police, which is the top person in that organization. So just kind of understand how that all works out. Now, in large municipal departments, like I said, there may be several independent units handled by a bureau chief, which is a senior administrator. It could be a commander or a captain, which oversees larger bureau operations like patrol, support, etc. Sergeants that supervise those respective patrol teams or units or officers. And then, kind of starting out would be the officers or the deputies that basically carry out the field work. So understand that, again, we're talking about independent organizations and that no two agencies are exactly alike. And again, many are hierarchical in nature with a chain of command and a rank system. So here's Phoenix PD, just to show you, and I know Chief Jerry Williams, so that's why I'm going to show you her organizational chart. So you'll have, an assistant chief, you'll have a chief, and you can see that these individuals basically command different bureaus, okay, or areas. So you have community support, investigations, the different patrol areas, you have strategic and tactical services, etc. So this is one kind of view, if you will. Now, problems are not uncommon, nor are they unique to police agencies. And most often, They are attributed to personnel changes, promotions, reassignments, retirements, and resignations. They can also be attributed to internal reorganization, meaning that maybe you're creating a new unit or a division or a team. And as a result of this, citizens sometimes have a problem figuring out, well, who's responsible for a particular police function or operational policy, because these hierarchical organizations are very confusing. Okay, when you try to figure out, well, who is who and who's in charge of what. Your textbook shows the organizational model of a traditional police department and they happen to have a civilian advisory board. So you have the chief of police, the assistant, you have internal affairs that reports directly to the chief. Then you have personnel and training, etc. And then you have different units. Kind of a more unique looking one would be LAPDs. And this is huge, and it might be hard to see, but let me see if I can bring up this PDF document. Sometimes this will work and sometimes it won't, and I hope it does because I can make it bigger. Okay, so when you do this, and I'll kind of be able to scroll around down here, you can see you have, Chief Moore, but here you have the Board of Police Commissions, right? And then here you have, bureau chiefs. And then here you have assistant chiefs. And then further down you have commanders, right? And then you get down here kind of further and they'll be like lieutenants. So this is huge. And you can see how, deputy chief that runs the detective group. So this is LAPDs, and it's extremely large. All right. So this is a really good example of a large metropolitan police department that has a very, very large hierarchical type organization. So hopefully that kind of makes sense a little bit to everybody. Now let me kind of go back here, and there we go. Okay, so that's a good look, and you can go back and look at that other one at your leisure. So with that, with the way these organizations are, we have to talk a little bit about movement and promotions. So in promoting personnel, most departments follow what's known as the time and rank system. And this means that before moving up that administrative ladder, if you will, an officer must spend a certain amount of time in the next lowest rank. So they can't like skip. So this prohibits departments from allowing an officers, to skip a rank. And sometimes it also prevents departments from hiring someone from the outside and giving that person a higher rank. So spending time in each rank has value, right? Because that way you learn in that rank. So here you can see for LAPD, you have, police recruit, etc. You have the police officer 3, the 3+1, the sergeant 2, detective 2, detective 3, lieutenant, captain, commander, deputy chief, assistant chief, and chief. And these are hash marks, and they indicate years of service, and typically they're in 5-year stripes, if you will. And you can see how these basically look. So these are just some basic insignias as far as rank goes. But again, this system, although this system is designed to promote fairness and stability in police agencies and limit favoritism, if you will, it can restrict some administrative flexibility. But it is important that we understand that the time and rank system is typically used, ensuring that officers work every rank before they move to the next rank. So let's talk about, the police role. Now, in countless books, movies, and TV shows, the public has been presented with a view of policing that kind of romanticizes police officers as fearless crime fighters who think little about their own safety as they engage in daily shootouts with machine gun toting drug runners, psychopaths, serial killers, and organized crime hitmen. And that doesn't mean that some of that doesn't happen, right? Occasionally, but not often, fictional patrol officers and detectives seem aware of departmental rules, legal decisions, civil suits, and physical danger. However, um, is that really close to real life? This portrayal of the selfless crime fighter. Well, the answer to that is not totally, but really not very close, according to what most research tends to find. Okay. Police officers are asked to deal with hundreds of different types of incidents each year, and crime fighting is only a very small part of that daily routine. Okay. Studies indicate that a significant portion of an officer's time is spent handling minor disturbances and service calls, as we call them, and other administrative duties. Okay, so police work then involves much, much more than just going out and catching criminals. Now, the evidence then, after we kind of look at all this, shows that unlike TV and movie portrayals, the police role involves many non-crime related type activities. And although the media again depicts police officers, busting criminals and engaging in high-speed chases, which they do, the true police role is really quite a bit more complex. So again, the police officers function in a variety of roles, from, dispensers of emergency medical care to keeping the peace on school grounds, to looking for lost folks. There's just so much more that they actually do. And, although officers in large urban departments may be called to handle more felony cases than those in small towns, they too find that most of their daily routine is not always crime related. And then we ask the question, but how many contacts are there really? So I put in a link to this special report from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and it talks about contacts between police and the public in 2015. So it's kind of an interesting article or paper, if you will. So take a look at it and see what you think. So now we're going to kind of move to patrol, which is the larger part, if you will, of a police organization. So regardless of the style of policing, the uniformed patrol officer is the backbone of the police department, usually accounting for about 2/3 or more of all of a department's personnel. Okay, so it's the large piece, right? And along with that, we do have to understand that patrol officers are the most highly visible component of the entire department and the criminal justice system as a whole, because they're the ones that are out there responding to calls, contacting all the people, making the traffic stops, writing tickets, arresting people, responding to calls. So not just from the police department are they the most visible, they are also the most visible in the criminal justice system. Okay, and that kind of makes sense. But for today's lecture, just understand they really are the backbone. Okay, and they are charged with supervising specific kind of designated areas of their jurisdiction that we call patrol beats or beats. And each patrol beat or patrolled area is covered 24 hours a day by different shifts. And a lot of departments now are on what they call a 312 shift. So they might have 3 shifts. They'll have a day shift, a cover shift, and a graveyard shift. So typically, a lot of times, that's how it might work. Okay. And to show you what it looks like, just quickly, here's an example by looking at the city of Rialto. So here's kind of a map, if you will, and this is the city in here. And when you talk about patrol beats, Rialto was divided into 4 different beats, right? Area 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it's kind of, so if you took these 4 different squares, and they basically broke the beats up, not only in somewhat squares or rectangles, etc., but also by calls for service. So you might see, well, hey, this area doesn't have much of the city of Rialto in it, but it gets a lot of the calls, okay? So that's why it's just that small. And down here is like an industrial area that doesn't quite get as many calls, although that beat might look a little bit bigger. So these beats are usually kind of put together by calls. And the way it works is, let's say that, not counting traffic, the motor officers, supervisors, whatever, just for sake of today, let's say we have 8 police cars working on this shift. And they could be 1 officer cars or 2. And you put 2 cars in like every beat. And this is how it works, okay? To kind of give you an idea. So let's say now that we get a call right here of a robbery. That's the little mask. Isn't that kind of cool? So they send a couple cars to the robbery, and if it's an in-progress robbery, it might even be 3 cars. So they all respond here, and while they're dealing with this, another call comes out of a traffic accident. All right, so now it's an accident, so they're going to send some cars to the accident. It might be 2, could be 3 if it's an injury accident. Now, what do you have left? If you've noticed, you really only have 2 cars, even though this is their patrol beat, but you still have all this city. And this is how it works all day and all night long. And as these cars handle this, this officer may just take the report, and these 2 cars may be cleared back up again to handle a call. But if, let's say, there's narcotic activity or an overdose down here way on the south end, well, we're going to send those cars down there, and now who's watching the city? So this is how and why sometimes calls start to stack up, because this continues again all the time. And it's just a process. And priority calls take place over report calls. So if they get here and this person is not there, they can't find him, these cars will go handle another call. If this is just going to be a report, 2 of these cars can clear, 1 stays to take the report, or they call a traffic person over, and then they're free. So again, that's kind of how calls for service works. So I wanted you to understand how that beat system kind of works. All right, so we know that they're charged with handling all of this stuff. So the job of a patrol officer has, little daily routine. Activities, again, they vary from one shift to another, and they run the gamut from report writing to an active shooter, right? So it could be life and death. You could be taking a report on a stolen TV or a burglary or something, and then you've got a bank robbery in progress. So, let's talk now then about the major purposes of patrol. And again, this activity changes depending upon what shift you're on. So we talked about the fact that each patrol beat or area is covered 24 hours a day by different shifts. The officer's specific duties are varied and complex. Yes, some officers might have to help with an alligator or a crocodile, and I don't know the difference, so whatever. Some officers may actually have to get the cat out of the tree. It's not always the fire department. But the size of the agency often dictates what functions are assigned to patrol. And I asked the question why, and just maybe take 2 seconds to kind of think, why would the size of an agency really dictate what kinds of calls patrol handle? And the rationale would be that if you have a large agency, you might have a large animal control unit, and they could come out and handle the animal calls. You might have a large gang unit, and they can handle the gang calls. You might have a large traffic unit, and they can handle the traffic-related calls, like the accidents and things like that. Same with detectives might come out and take over certain investigations that a patrol officer was working. But if you have a small agency, then you're, as a patrol officer, you're kind of expected to do like a lot of the stuff. So that's why that size of agency really does dictate what functions are assigned to patrol. But here's some of the major purposes of patrol. Would be to deter crime by maintaining that visible presence, right? So being seen, maintaining public order or peacekeeping, responding quickly to law violations and emergencies. And when you go back to the beat system, officers don't respond from the station. Now, they could if they're there doing something at the station, report writing or whatever. A lot of times now you can report write in your car on the computer. But if you're at the station, you might roll out from the station to a call. But officers are always driving around. That's the visible presence. Okay. Identifying and apprehending law violators, providing aid, facilitating the movement of traffic and people, and creating that feeling of security by that visibility. And they do it in different ways. Sometimes there's bike patrol, there's motorcycles, there's neighborhood watch. I mean, there's all these different things and aspects of policing, okay? So that's part of the patrol function here. So patrol officers, you know, the responsibilities are really immense. Again, they may suddenly be faced with an angry mob, an armed felon, or a suicidal person and be forced to make that split-second decision on what type of action to take. And when police are present and visible, there really is a sense of security created in a neighborhood, and the residents' opinion of law enforcement tends to improve. But does mere visibility, does that really deter crime? And that's always been one of those questions. Sometimes as officers drive around a residential area and maybe they're kind of, just kind of cruising around, somebody might actually call up dispatch and say, hey, why are the officers in my neighborhood? And it's because their job is to drive through areas within their patrol beat and, look for things that are out of the ordinary, etc. And then there are different types, right, when it comes to different aspects of policing. And this depends on the size and scope of your agency as well. When it comes to patrol, it could be foot patrol. You could be walking a foot beat somewhere. Car patrol is kind of the norm. Motorcycles typically work traffic. You have bike patrol, even segways. You have mounted patrol. You have the airship. A lot of departments, larger departments, have helicopters. You have water patrol. You have the beach patrol, if you happen to have a beach in your area. So there's all these different types of patrol. You might even have a 4x4 or off-road motorcycles, depending upon what type of city you live in and the terrain, etc., that's in that city. Let's kind of move on now and talk about some ways to improve the patrol function. So most experts agree that the bulk of patrol effort is devoted to what has been described as kind of order maintenance or peacekeeping. And peacekeeping, by definition, is maintaining order and civility within the officer's assigned jurisdiction. And, the police may encounter many troubling incidents that need some sort of fixing. Enforcing laws might be one tool a patrol officer uses. Threats, coercion, sympathy, understanding, and apathy might be others. And then on those higher kind of level calls where the average patrol officer might respond to that they don't have the training, equipment, or resources to deal with, that would be where you would call a specialized team. And in a lot of organizations, it would be the Special Weapons and Tactics team or SWAT. They basically handle the most difficult situations. Okay, but again, most important is to keep things under control so that no complaints arise. So, again, kind of the real police role, if you look at it, may be that of kind of a community problem solver, right? Because they're out there solving all these different types of problems in the community, whatever those problems might end up being. And, again, when you're still talking about the patrol function, that police officers practice a policy of what we call selective enforcement, which means they're concentrating on some crime, but handling the majority in an informal manner. So, selective enforcement, again, is concentrating on a certain area and a certain type of crime. A police officer is supposed to know, when to take action and when not to, who to arrest and, who to deal with by issuing a warning or taking some other form of formal action. So consequently, the patrol officer's job is extremely demanding and really often unrewarding and unappreciated because they're just doing so many different things. And it really is tough. And, if a mistake is made, the officer can come under fire from his peers and supervisors as well as the general public. So, consequently, the patrol officer's job, again, is extremely demanding and often unrewarding. And the attitude of police officers toward the public when this happens, not surprisingly, is sometimes characterized as ambivalent or even cynical, because it really is one of those kind of unappreciated type situations. For me, it's very rewarding because you are out there trying to make a difference and help people. And that's what most law enforcement officers get into that career for. But it is a lot of times you are unappreciated, and sometimes you can get a little bit cynical. Now, in response to some of the issues that we have spoken about, police departments have initiated several programs and policies to try to improve patrol effectiveness. And some of these are considered a little bit more controversial than others. So let's kind of take a look at some of these, and then we'll take our first break, if you will. So the first would be proactive policing. And this is an aggressive law enforcement style in which patrol officers take the initiative against crime instead of waiting for some criminal act to occur. So they're actively looking for those individuals that are out there looking suspicious, acting a little bit funny or strange, to which they believe that they might be involved in criminal activity. And proactive policing can also include increased targeting of specific offenses, more arrests or citations, or even a combination of both. And here's kind of a low-level example. If you have a bunch of crashes or things that are happening, let's say in front of a school, so you may assign your traffic unit to go out there and write several citations to deter people from doing that type of behavior in the future. Same if you have an area of drug dealing that's starting to get out of control. You may have your narcotics unit and your gang unit out there proactively stopping people, etc., to try to identify the drug dealers, make arrests, write tickets, etc., to try to deter those drug dealers from hanging out in that particular area. So that's an example of proactive policing. And one very interesting theory that has come about, and it's been around for a while, but the order maintenance function that has, again, become pretty much all the more important in the light of George Keeling and James Q. Wilson's popular theory, broken windows. Their highly influential article made 3 different key points, but let me kind of tell you what it is. So George Keeling and James Q. Wilson, they came up with the broken windows theory, if you will. And this sees the role of police as maintainers of community order and safety. And the theory contends that if a neighborhood is allowed to run down, then it gives the impression that nobody cares. And then people, kind of basically start to commit more crimes in that area. So crime starts to increase. So the longer you let these windows be broken, trash gather up, you know, cobwebs under cars, you know, all this kind of stuff, you're going to start to, you know, start to see an increase in crime, because the thought is that nobody really cares about that particular area or place. So here are the 3 key points. The first is neighborhood disorder creates fear. So urban areas filled with, you know, street people, youth gangs, prostitutes, and even those that might be mentally disturbed are the ones most likely to maintain a high degree of crime. The second would be that neighbors give out crime promoting signals. So a neighborhood filled with deteriorated houses, you know, unrepaired broken windows, disorderly behavior, etc., kind of gives out crime promoting signals. And therefore, honest citizens live in fear in these areas, and then predatory criminals are kind of attracted to these areas because they know that nobody's taking care of it. And then finally, police need to aggressively target low-level quality of life crimes. And if they are successful, or if they are to successfully reduce fear and prevent more serious crime from coming into the neighborhoods, they must first address the minor problems that invite more serious ones. So fixing the broken windows, boarding up the doors that are, you know, broken open, spraying over the graffiti, locking up all the fences, making sure the weeds aren't too high. That is basically a deterrent, and people won't come there. But if you leave it looking really bad, the thought is that more crime is going to start to kind of gather. Now, broken windows is a little bit controversial because some people perceive it as harassment. So why focus on low-level petty crimes when there really are more severe ones, right? And others feel that broken windows policing is remarkably effective. So kind of interesting. So that's kind of the essence of the broken windows theory. And then we're going to do just a couple more, and then we'll take our break. So again, we're still, you know, in the patrol function, talking about now rapid response. So it is widely assumed that criminals can be caught if the police can simply get to the scene of a crime quickly. And the importance of response time has really been debated. This is a very kind of debatable subject. Traditionally, rapid response has been stressed, but it's also been called into question. So does, you know, getting there fast, this rapid response, really increase the chances of catching a criminal? So that's kind of an interesting question, right? Well, some studies have shown that arrests are seldom attributed to fast police response. Really, the higher percentage is what we call a smart police response. So if a crime happens at a certain place and the suspects leave the scene and they're in a vehicle, the fact that you're responding quickly to where the crime occurred, more than likely they will be gone, right? The smarter officers, if you will, even though someone still has to go to the scene of the crime to make sure the victim is okay and to get information, etc., but it's on the way to the crime, figuring out in your mind what route the suspects might take to escape, and keeping your eyes open for the vehicle is really what is going to catch the suspects, not necessarily getting to that scene quick. Okay? So, with that said, when you talk about crimes, there's discovery crimes. Those are the ones that are brought to the attention of police after being committed. And that's typically about 75%. So a burglary happens, the suspects are gone, the victims call the police. So the crime is brought to the attention after. Involvement crimes are those, that are being committed kind of like right now. Okay, they're in progress, if you will, and that's only about 25%. So you can see that sometimes that rapid response isn't always going to catch the person, if you will. So, does the research support this view? Does rapid response really increase the chances of police catching lawbreakers? Well, realistically, the jury's kind of still out on this. But again, some researchers have found that a quick response can be beneficial. And it can. Of course it can. But the first person that's rolling to the scene, sure, they can get there quick, etc. But you got to watch the outlying areas for the fact that perhaps the suspect is already gone. So with that being said, let's go ahead and stop. We'll take our little break. So this will conclude part 1 of chapter 6, police, organization, role, and function.